It's 5:30, so I think we'll probably give it a few until I kick off the talk. But I'd love to know who's in the room. So maybe if you all could go around and share just a little bit about yourself. I know a few of you already, but if there's anything that you are kind of working on or why you showed up today, I just love to get to know kind of who's here. So if you want to kick it off.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Trina. So just a little bit about myself. I recently started a new job May, and basically fully virtually onboarded. And since not still met anyone from my team, so it's been a huge transition, as well as it's a new space as far as just the kind of focus area that I'm working on. So I saw this online, as well as, I'm single, live by myself, so wanting to meet different ladies and just professionals, and hearing from you and saw your story, I can relate on some levels, so I was really interested in meeting you.
Great, thanks so much for joining. Jen?
Hi, I'm Genesis. I came because I am friends with Natalie. I'm also in the middle of like a transition between getting a new job that will probably be virtual, so you can always learn a bit from her. Also open to meeting new people.
Awesome.
Hi everyone, my name is Star. Sorry.
No problem.
She started there.
They liked your intro, I guess.
I started my new job 2 weeks ago. My first job out of college. So yeah, really working a lot on myself. So I'm personally improve myself. Trying to work on that. And I'm definitely down for some friends who are into improving themselves too.
Very cool.
My name is Sarah. I remember your face from She's Independent stuff. But I worked for 20 years in the entertainment industry, and then I was dying to get out. Now I'm out, and I don't like it. So I'm really this popped up at the right time. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to tell my story, so we're looking forward to some tips and connecting to get out.
Awesome.
So I realized that I did 10 years of government this year, and so I'm trying to figure out a way out, but don't want to jump up, figuring out the other thing too. So
Yeah.
kind of everything right now.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to say just really quickly for the people on Zoom, you're welcome to type to each other and tell each other what you do, what you're looking for. But one thing I'm hearing in the room, and we're going to get back to the remaining two, I'm hearing a lot about work. So I just wanted to make that comment. I think there's a lot that we're all working on in any area of our life, but I'm hearing a lot about work. I'm also hearing transition, hearing want to make change, but just calling that out. Julia?
So I work under Natalie, and the job is 100% remote. So I'm always looking for interactions and love everything that involves personal growth and people empowerment. So
Awesome. How about you in the back, the gentleman?
But had the opportunity to attend tonight, and personally very interested in professional personal growth, maybe people that think and talk about those opportunities and topics. And tonight is an opportunity to sit in and join all the conversations. So
Awesome. Okay, so with that, I have my handy notebook. I actually took notes for this one because today's talk and topic is something that I have never presented on. I've never talked about, I guess, to an audience, really just small group settings. So I took down some notes because in telling my story, I wanted to make sure that I kind of hit on and touched on different things that I thought would be impactful. Hopefully you'll learn from it. The talk itself, what I wrote down, it'll probably be 15, 20 minutes. But I think it's really to get the conversation started. And then from there, if people want to open up and share other things, whether it's the work stuff, personal stuff, ask questions. I mean, I'm an open book. So that's just setting the stage for what I'm gonna cover with you. Okay, so a little bit of background on me. I know some of the people in this room know me, but I moved to Colorado about 2.5 years ago. And I started in Denver, now I live in Boulder, and I'm an engineer, mathematician turned investor, entrepreneur, impact person. And it's been a journey. And so what I'm gonna share about over the next 15 or 20 minutes or so is really how I got to this place of feeling really good about what I'm doing. And that's not just professionally, but it definitely includes the professional side. The other thing I want to say when I share my background is I know I led with a bit of kind of who I am and what I do, but I care so much about gender equity. I care so much about empowering women and having these authentic and real conversations. And I care a ton about mindset work. When I share my story, I'll share a bit about what happened in my family, but I always cared about it, and it's been something that's been kind of critical for me given the path that I've been on. So I wanted to kind of open it up and just say, or pose a question, which is, what are we all looking for and what do we all want? And I think we can answer it a million ways, but when I was thinking about it the other night, when I took down some notes, I wrote down a feeling of health, happiness, and a life well lived, or fulfillment. I think those are kind of interchangeable. And so what I'm going to share with you is not only my story, but also how I've come to this place and found this place of, kind of my professional superpower meets alignment and fulfillment with what I do and how I live. And my story includes, hashtag me too. I worked in Wall Street. It includes, grit and working probably way too hard and making myself unhealthy, breaking, I'd say, or shattering, glass ceilings in ways, trauma and loss in my family, and then really kind of diving into this mindset work and figuring out how to live intentionally. And by the way, I wouldn't say I figured it all out. Again, it's about sharing, and we're all kind of on our own journeys. So you're all here in Colorado. So I'm already going to guess that you're probably a little bit, and sorry, that's not the people on listening in virtually, but for the people in the room who live in Colorado, I'm going to guess that you might already have some connection to kind of spiritual awareness, or, getting outside and loving the mountains. Maybe you moved here because you said, wow, I need a lifestyle change. A lot of us aren't even aware of the stress and the anxieties that we bring with ourselves every day. And even though we know we need to make a change, we don't necessarily make the change, or we make it much later in life than we want to. Hi, no problem. So the story that I'm going to tell about, where I came from, I'm going to start around 2004. And it really starts with my career on Wall Street. So for my first 2 years, and actually, forget 2004, 2006 when I graduated, for my first 2 years as a full-time analyst on Wall Street, I wore pants every day to work, okay? Every day. Never wear a skirt, never wear a dress. I thought that if I dressed a certain way, looked a certain way, worked so hard and did everything right, that I would get that promotion. I would get that, mentor. I would be able to become the head of some trading operation. I was trading derivatives, so some really tough stuff, very type A. And I did that for about 5 years. And I showed up, but I didn't really show up as myself. I showed up and I did the work. I showed up and I asked questions, but I didn't really understand what I wanted. I didn't really know how to excel. And it was almost like I was fighting something just by showing up, not being myself, right? Wearing this kind of man's outfit or whatever you want to call it, and not embracing that feminine side. And what I will say is there's a few things that stick with you in terms of whether it's career feedback or, things that people say to you. I was out with friends for drinks one night at some trendy bar in Soho, New York City. And one of the heads of the trading desks saw me, and I was dressed up. because I never dressed up at work, but I was like dressed up, high heels and everything. And he said, Natalie, you could wear sweatsuits every day and we'd still think you're hot, right? Forget that that's a sexist remark. What I learned from that was, what am I doing? Like wearing, these things that I'm not even comfortable wearing. What am I doing trying to hide who I am? They're still going to judge me. They're still going to treat me, a certain way. It's not about what I'm wearing to work. I'm not saying you should show up wearing, just a bra. My point is that trying to be something you're not, like, that's not really helping anyone. And so I started, showing up and wearing some things that I felt a little bit more confident in, a little bit maybe prettier in. Again, not trying to make it too sexy, because I still think, you want to be professional, but understanding and recognizing, like, I didn't need to wear pants every day. And that was just, one thing to learn early in my career that I thought was fun. I did get harassed regularly. And, it was one of those things where sometimes it was more egregious than other times. And this is before Me Too was a name. And let me actually move this because it's getting super bright in my eyes once more. I think it'll be okay. Okay, there we go. Now we're good. But how did I deal with it? When somebody said, oh, like, why aren't you sexier here? Or, why don't you go out to dinner with me there? And I would like mix this. It came at me again. Did you see that? It truly came at me. Like, it came at me. It's my mom saying hi, but anyway, I'm gonna go over here. So I would mix this like humor with, hurt, because how do you respond when these people that you're trying to work with are putting you in that position? You're a young woman, you're like figuring out what you want in your career and who you are. And it was really tough. And, I would try to fit in, but I'd also wind up crying in bathrooms. Not every day, but it happened. And it happened more than once. It probably happened a dozen times that I can remember. And you put on, you cry, and then you put on that brave face, you go back on the training floor and you like pretend nothing happened. And like, it wasn't healthy. But basically, what I was doing in those years is I was just like taking all of this stress, all this anxiety, and like pushing it down. And I was sick. Sometimes on the weekend, like I couldn't get out of bed. And it's not, getting sick where I'm like sniffly and like, something's physically wrong. Like I literally just, sometimes my body was just so done. And I think that was like my body saying, make a fucking change, right? And it took me a long time to start listening to that. But basically, after 5 years of grinding and really getting to the point where like, you are not enjoying what you are doing and it's beyond repair, I finally left. And when I left my Wall Street gig, there was a whole decoupling of like, okay, I make a bunch of money and I'm a Wall Street trader. And I mean, probably years to fully unwind myself from that identity. And I think when we did that earlier exercise of like, tell me a little bit about yourself, we so much identify with the professional. And when you have a career, you do something for 10 years, government 10 years, it's like, you have to find yourself. And you can find yourself when you're still in those roles, but so often we just get so wrapped up in it. We like forget who we are, what we want, what drives us. And so I really had to unwind from it. But when I was going through these career transitions, I ran away from finance. I thought I would never do it again. And I got pulled back in because actually it's a superpower of mine, and we'll get into that. But I basically, decided to invest in myself, and I chose tech sales because I'm an engineer, mathematician, love data, really like people. And I just figured this was a really good intersection, for my skills. No career coach, even though if I knew about career coaches, I would have done it. And I knocked on doors, and a lot of people said, oh, well, at Google, you need this MBA, or, you need this criteria. I answered some questions or interviews, really with bad answers, but like, I learned a lot, and then I landed a job. And when I landed this gig, I ended up being like phenomenal, and I think, if you've read the book, grit is one of the best indicators of success in sales roles. And what does that mean? You're working so hard, you put your energy and kind of soul into it. But basically, I mean, I taught myself. I was self-taught where, I was reading books, and I was, doing the research to find out what were old school kind of tactics and new school, but figuring out what did I need to be successful, because I was, I knew I wanted it. I was determined. And, ultimately I worked really hard and I got there, but as hard as I worked, and when I was the top producer in division of 150 salespeople, where I got multiple promotions, I got a 30+% raise from the COO at Bloomberg, which is a massive organization. I still wasn't feeling like rewarded. I wasn't feeling like I was getting what I wanted. And it was like I had to fight for everything. I had not figured out sponsorship or, really the model to like map a path in your career. I was just like, working so hard, and basically because I love to negotiate and I'm okay with no and pushback, like I was getting to these next phases, but it wasn't happening in an organic way, and it wasn't happening in a way that felt good. The culture also wasn't fun in various roles, which is why I chose to move on, because money is not the reason you stay in a role. You may think it is, and that's maybe why you do a transition, but that's not ultimately going to satisfy you. So the thing that, was kind of fulfilling me at this point in my career is dollars in the bank account. I wasn't feeling good about what I was doing, even though I was really good at it. And that's a really hard realization. And then even the harder thing to do is to make the change when you get there. I'm going to skip over some things because, again, I think it's more the big story I'm trying to share. But I said, I'm leaving New York. I want to do something else. I'm so type A. I want an environment that's healthy, that is rewarding. And my first stop actually was Colorado. I'd wanted to move out to Colorado for years, loved the mountains, loved to ski. I had, close friends here, and it just didn't feel like the right time. I went, to a few different places, and ultimately I ended up in San Francisco. And if I knew more then, in terms of what I know now about decision-making, I would have gone to Colorado when I wanted to. But I waited another, 3.5 years because I just didn't have that confidence in myself. I didn't have the confidence that I could make the career I wanted work here. And I have, but I just didn't know at the time that I could do it. And so, and by the way, I lined up great interviews when I was here locally, and I had offers. It just didn't feel right. But it also didn't feel right ultimately to not be in Colorado. So I ultimately found my way back here. I moved to San Francisco ultimately, where I thought, I needed to be in terms of elevating my professional self. And I got back into the grind that I was trying to escape. So even though it was a beautiful place, beautiful city, I was back at it, working too hard, back in ultimately finance, where it was really interesting in ways, but like, again, wasn't for me, wasn't, the fit. And ultimately, I was really excited about working with them. I was the first woman, that they hired. I hired other women on the team. And I didn't really know what was off. And I was just, again, kind of hiding behind the numbers and the data, doing the work, like something's not feeling good, but I just ignored it. And I say that because I think so often we get in that pattern, and, once you can identify it, I think it's really helpful. And then you can actually start to think about making a change. So I want to share, some of the best career advice I was ever given. And I was at dim sum lunch with one of our senior investor contacts, who happened to be a woman. And we had just a really phenomenal conversation. And she said to me that, she asked me what my superpower was. And before I could answer, she said, do not tell me what you think you're good at. What do people say you're best at? They're two different things. I thought it was one thing, and I'm like, no, you're right. Like, this is what people tell me I'm best at. And I didn't want to answer that way, but like, that's what you're best at. It's not what you think, it's what people have told you. So really getting that feedback. And then we talked about, the importance of finding that intersection of what is your superpower? What are you best at? And really, what do you want to do? Passion, impact, whatever it is, like what drives you? When I interview people now for roles, like I don't say to them, tell me about your skills. We'll get there, but I say, where do you want to be? What drives you? When I heard Julia, what are you excited about? And that tells you so much more about where somebody is going, how hard they're going to work, just getting to know the person. I mean, ultimately it's about connecting with people. And the thing about feedback is you can hear it, but really listening to it are two different things. So it took me time to really start listening to what people were telling me. And again, if you really listen to it, you can grow from it, it can help shape your career. Work at that private equity shop had not been going super well. I'd asked for some support from our partner team, and it was in an area that they thought I should just be able to handle. Culture, you can't just handle it, comes from the top. Point being, they didn't like the feedback, or they didn't like what I'd asked. So fast forward a few months, and tears are streaming down my face as one of the partners is delivering the news to me the day following our 3 Michelin star holiday dinner, by the way, that they're going to give me a really nice compensation package for me to basically figure out what I want to do next. So for me, completely unexpected. His response was he was surprised to hear I hadn't expected it. And I reflect on that. And even though I was really surprised in the moment, again, I think I was hiding behind data's numbers. I'm going to make a ton of money, and I'm going to like use all my grit and all my energy, and I'm going to make this work. But like, it was not the role for me. So I am thrilled that I moved on from and basically got fired from that role. I told my mom the news, and I told her I was taking time. I wasn't going to jump into my next role. I really wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. She was less than enthusiastic. I think maybe our parents' generation is one where they really like stability. They don't like us, switching roles and whatnot. I convinced her to be excited. Plus, it was my choice to make. And in taking some time off, I hopped on a plane to visit some of my best girlfriends here in Colorado. Went skiing out in Mammoth with some friends from LA. And then my life changed forever. And I'm open about this. I think it's really important to talk about for a variety of reasons, but we lost my mom to suicide January 2nd, 2019. And my mom was my number one cheerleader. She was the woman who raised me to believe I could do anything, that I deserved to be in the advanced math classes with just boys when the teacher said I had a learning disability because I didn't want to brush their hair. She fought for me, and again, it opened closed doors to opportunity. And when my world stopped, I said, I'm going to take a reset, right? I'm really going to figure out what it is I need. I booked a one-way ticket to Michigan with my dog cuddling close and was just in disbelief. It doesn't even sink in or set in that you've lost somebody unexpectedly for 4 to 6 months. And just nonstop tears, tears that don't come because you're crying so much. Your eyes literally become like white over because it's just salt. So I was really grateful at this point in time to be on a work hiatus because I didn't have work. I just was healing. I was just, a mess, but giving myself what I needed. And as I grieved, cried, and handled trustee duties, such as, handling finances and whatnot and tying things out for the funeral. Actually, no, my cousins helped with that. They were amazing. But still, trustee duties over the next month. I laid on the couch at my sister's in Michigan and really put thought in around, when I was ready to go home, what I wanted to do. And when I returned to San Francisco, I was up on the roof with my dog, letting her pee up there, which you're not supposed to do. I remember this was my first notable connection with spirit, I'll call it. You may call your own form of God or whatever in your life. But the moon had like the brightest halo that I can ever recall. I don't even recall moon halos. And it felt like a hug from my mom. It was incredible. And it was kind of this, I'm okay, you're okay. And within days, I decided to pack up and, head to Colorado. So, I had a really nice, but very small condo in San Francisco, packed up everything I needed. I came out to Colorado for, I think it was about 6 weeks. And one of my cousins was a really great road companion for that experience. And I ultimately moved out to Colorado after I, up and sold my condo in San Francisco. And And over the first few months, in Colorado, like I didn't rush anything. I cried, I rested, maybe got movement in, yoga, saw friends, but like I didn't push anything. And as I was processing and healing and resting, I dug into and I tried some of these really interesting modalities that are great for mindset work, from, conscious breath work, where you're doing basically really deep breath work for a period of time and kind of connecting to your soul. You literally get these like out of body, experiences because of your over oxygenation, really interesting stuff. I did shadow work where you kind of, go into this ego that's like unfriendly and you befriend it and you figure out like, what are your, turning your ego basically into a superpower. I realized my ego was like a red-faced, sweating Wall Street D-bag, for lack of a better term, but that I was really good at finance and that I knew data and I knew numbers, and that even though this guy was like crazy and liked to drink and go out and party, like there was something about that I could work with, and that was like really powerful to understand finances, to understand how to maybe befriend those types, even though I don't choose to socialize with them anymore. Somatic therapy, releasing, tension in your body, like really, really interesting practices. And I visited yoga retreats and, I showed up on the mountain trails. I went to networking coffees and I'd be covered in chalk from the rock climbing wall, right? But that was cool because I was grieving, I was processing, like no judgment, anything goes. And I just showed up in a way that felt right and felt good, but like I didn't pressure myself. In that time, I also launched She's Independent, which is this business that I'm really excited about for impact, which is all about connecting with women identifying, promoting diversity, inspiring, skill development, basically mindset work for women identifying, because we go through a ton of crap. There is a professional, I'd say, development focus, even though there's a lot of mindset work. And that's because ultimately, me being a professional is my superpower. I'm an executive these days. I'm an investor. I'm doing a bunch of incredible things. And I'm so excited to share some of those stories and learnings, recognizing that the mindset stuff I love, but I'm not, a trained yogi or coach. So as time passed, and I continued to heal, I found myself with more energy coming back. And, I'd be doing an hour or two of work every few days after the acute trauma. But then I found myself wanting to do more and wanting to, dive further into projects. I'd always found pleasure in, being great at what I did professionally, but now I was really investing time and energy into things that aligned, that I actually appreciated, and into projects that were meaningful. We lost another family member to suicide. Again, very open with a story, because I think it's so important that we're all aware of our mental health, our collective mental health, the way that we treat and speak with and connect with others. And my 17-year-old cousin at the time, Z, was a huge fan of She's Independent. And every time, shit happened, I knew that the path and what I was doing, investing in, whether it was myself or honoring, those in my family that we'd lost, I knew I was on the right track. And I knew that the energy and the passion, like they were unmatched, because here's all this love I have, for these people in my life. And I feel their presence, I feel their connection as I work on this project. So I'll roll back to in San Francisco, before I moved to Colorado, because I'd had this dream of being a fractional executive. When I was in San Francisco, I applied, I don't take no, but people were offering me full-time roles. They weren't taking me for that fractional executive role that I wanted. And, again and again, it was, oh, well, we'll hire you for this, but we can't do that. And, now here in Colorado, as my passion was really, aligning with my professional skills, it all started to work out, and roles were coming to me and CEOs were coming to me and they were saying, we want to work with you. And I said, well, these are my terms. And they said, okay. And so I stepped into, multiple fractional executive roles, quite an interesting journey. And I will say, a lot of learnings and recognizing that too many things is not healthy or good. But something really interesting happened again, which was I was getting more senior titles than I'd ever had in my career prior. I was always, senior enterprise seller, even though I was crushing business and very strategic, and the investors and the founders would all take my feedback. But now I was, the VP of sales. Now I was given CRO roles, chief revenue officer. So truly executive roles. And I was also, stepping into advisory work. So really strategic, now I'm sitting with equity for businesses where I'm giving them strategy and advisory help, but I don't have to execute, like really, really interesting stuff. So one thing I want to kind of pause there and talk about is how do you go from, oh, I'm sitting on the couch and I have a bunch of time to myself to I'm stepping into new executive roles that I've never had. What you maybe have heard about, or maybe you haven't, is a lot of people in these executive roles running businesses, like they're all going through imposter syndrome. Show of hands, does everyone feel imposter syndrome? Right? And I'm telling you, I talk to executives that have done a lot in their careers. They feel it too, men and women, all colors. And the interesting thing is I'd done mindset work up to this point. And so I had these tools and skills, and I realized I could apply them to things like professional confidence. For example, when I'm, attending an all hands on deck meeting, and it's a bunch of white men that are, 20 to 40 years older than me. I've never been a CRO. We're doing things that I've never done before. So I actually went through and I said to myself, you're an executive. And I gave myself the pep talk, and it's not like I would do it every day in the mirror, but like I actually had to deconstruct and say, I already know I'm a confident person, but how am I going to show up in this situation? And I still remember, I think I told Matt, my boyfriend, when I had these, I presented to this group of individuals, and it was, I don't know, maybe 35 on live, and, some really senior people, and they're DMing over Teams, basically saying, wow, you are up-leveling this organization, your professional, achievements and what you're bringing, like you're transforming us. So incredible, right? Going from, can I do this role, to like, oh, I'm doing this role, to I'm doing it confidently and getting accolades. I mean, really an incredible journey. But I think the thing that's even more incredible than that is that empowerment of recognizing it wasn't right for me. So saying no, stepping back, graciously, you don't want to burn bridges, but we don't have infinite time and energy. And so recognizing, oh, doesn't align, not for me, move on. Okay. Not easy to transition, not easy to go through these things, but that will ultimately allow you to like have that space, that headspace, that time to actually, commit and do things you want. I will say that because I stepped back from that role, I'm in another role now that's it is the most interesting revenue executive role of my career. Great company, they care about impact, amazing culture. And again, these things, they're not going to happen if you don't make the space for them. So, finally, I'm showing up as myself. I'm harnessing the power of my intellect and experience. And I have this newfound confidence, and it clearly is attracting and also allowing me to operate just at a different level in my career. So I want to pause there for a second, because anxiety in my life has been real. In San Francisco, my anxiety had been so elevated that I had turned Ubers around that were headed to low-key events to meet friends, unable sometimes to catch my breath because my heart was racing. And this week, as an example, not only do we have this talk now, but there's 2 talks on Friday. They're both virtual. One's on mindset, one's on negotiations. There'll be probably 500 people in each one, and I'm not stressed. And I have a house closing on October 18th, and I'm not stressed. And last week I was traveling. I was on 3 planes for work, and I went through a 3.5 immersive day boot camp for women getting on boards. And somehow I'm not stressed. And it's like kind of wild to say it. But I really think it's about, when you're aligning yourself with things that you want to do, where you're excited, you're going to have the energy. And if you create those boundaries and you push back on the things that, you know, don't fit, you can do whatever you want to do. So I guess the other comment I'll make there is, you know, that concept of presence, which is because so much was happening, I'm not thinking future. I plan a little bit for the future, but like, I know how quickly I can get things done and how efficiently. So like, I'm not saying I need to get all this done now. I know that tomorrow I have this time carved out, or, you know, not worrying about next week, basically taking the days as they come. I think that's huge for, you know, working through the anxieties. So, you know, I've shared openly about the loss and the trauma. I didn't go too deeply into it. I've written about that a bit on my blog. But I think the important thing here is, you know, that story alone, it does not define me. I live differently. I've learned a lot about myself, but it's not like, hey, I'm Natalie, like I'm a suicide loss survivor. It's, hey, I'm Natalie, like I know who I am and what I want, and I care a ton about mindset and mental health awareness, and I'll talk about all this stuff. But in terms of figuring out your story, right? What drives you? What's your why? What's your passion? And we all have shit that happens to us, right? Whether or not you fully have like grasped it and been open to it, we've all gone through something, and you can figure out, you know, what's going to drive you and what your why is when you do that work. And, you know, these experiences, really the death and loss, but professional experience as well, getting fired, you know, having these tough transitions. I mean, it really allowed me ultimately to go deeper into who I am and what I want. And it showed me, you know, that even the toughest of life events I can get through. And the confidence you get from that, like it's unmatched, right? I already was an expert negotiator, and I already was good in an uncomfortable room. I already could negotiate and ask for more money. And for whatever reason, I've always been good with discomfort, but now I know, you know, that I can really do anything and get through anything. And I've also recognized, you know, how important it is to live a life that's both meaningful and also healthy. So there's so much power for us, you know, collectively, individually, to draw on from these lived experiences. But again, it's, are you open to it? And are you doing that work to say, you know, I care about the professional development or the personal development. I'm going to grow from this experience. And when you own your story, when you find out, you know, who you are and what you need, you really stop worrying about so much what other people think and that external validation. And that's huge for how you live. You start showing up, you know, as your energetic and inspiring full self in and out of the office, and you'll glam it up or, you know, dress down because you live in Colorado when you want, because you like comfort. But you're not going to ask yourself, oh, is it okay to wear this dress in front of the men I work with? You're going to do it, and you're going to have fun doing it, right? You know, another part of the journey is you're befriending your ego. So that voice in your head, and it still may need reminders from time to time that you are confident and that it should shut the hell up. But you're in charge. And, you know, when you feel into these decisions and you've gone through this experience of like, something is off, then you can start recognizing that. What's that pit in my stomach? How do I feel? Feel into the decision. What should I do? If I'm, you know, thinking through, should I do that career transition? How does this feel? How do I feel when I envision myself doing it? And you can literally start using, you know, your physical attributes and how you tense up to start reading, because your body knows before your mind knows what you should be doing, how to find alignment. I may be not explaining that super well, but the concepts are there. But, you know, ultimately, when you're living more freely and you're living for yourself, you wake up one day and you recognize, hopefully you recognize that achievement of where you were and where you are now. And the hope is that you pause and that you appreciate it. So I guess that's kind of the story. And I'll share a little bit more today, which is, you know, what's next for me? I've learned skills, but it's stuff I constantly invest in. Boundaries are tough. They're tough for everyone. They're tough to exercise. They're tough to reestablish. You have to do it, right? I work on, you know, my boundary setting all the time. Energy, knowing that if I, you know, deplete myself, I'm going to be sick. So making sure I don't get there. You know, I love the mindset work. I love, you know, spending the time to figure out what I want and what I need. Another area of my life, which I'm really excited Matt's here to hear this one. You know, I've been really good at professional development and figuring out who I am professionally, but my love life, hi Matt, you know, that's something that's been newer for me, where it's like, you know, actually finding somebody who's like not a pushover, who like has his own life going on. And so him literally being in the room, like this was scary for me, because I'm sharing a part of myself that I share to women identifying all the time in co-ed rooms, but you know, not to somebody that I'm dating. So there's so many areas, you know, that we can all grow. And I think, you know, the story is like, be open to it, have the conversation. And if you start to tap into, you know, the authentic you, you're going to be a better leader. You're going to be healthier. You're just going to have more fun in what you do. So that's a little bit about my story. Thanks for listening. I know I have the computer going, and I don't think I can necessarily take actually, if you all have questions, you can type them in the chat, and I'm happy to take a look. But if anyone has questions, you know, I'm an open book. So thanks for joining, and I hope that was helpful, inspiring, you know, offered some food for thought. Anyone want to chime in with your career transition or things that come to mind?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the somatic work.
Yeah.
Can you just go into a little more depth about that?
Yeah. So somatic awareness therapy, and I didn't mention all the different things I tried, but basically, and actually before I get to somatic awareness, when you go through a trauma, there's like a bunch of things. And actually, so I have a mindset series, it's all pre-recorded, and then I have some like resources around it, but there are things you can do to release tension when you go through a trauma. Really helpful stuff to know. There are things you can do to your body, such as cupping or tapping, excuse me, where you're like changing the way that your body processes things. Again, I'm not a specialist. I'm just, you know, sharing some of what I've done and what I've learned. Somatic awareness is basically that you're holding tension in different places in your body. So as an example, you may go through an exercise where it's how to release tension in your jaw. Maybe when you sleep at night, you have tension in your jaw. And that's, if you can learn to kind of release this, it's actually a way to process, I think, thoughts, emotions. It's like things that are embedded in you. Maybe something happened and like you tensed your jaw at one point, and you might just keep doing that, or your stomach or your neck. And so it's this, you hold, I want to say, not just trauma, but anxieties and fear and all these things like in your body. So it's this practice of, and you could do, you know, guided, even virtual practice. It's just kind of in ways similar to like a yin or restorative yoga, but it's more like targeting, opening up and releasing these tensions.
I know like in Denver right now, there's people who do somatic work and have wait lists.
Oh yeah, and we've all been through trauma, right? We all have mindset issues, you know, given COVID. And it's like, to be able to release your bodies, because a lot of people process physically and mentally. Like some therapists will do that type of work in addition to talk therapy. Really interesting stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really identified with your story, and you know, forgot about like even dressing up. It's just so nice because in my office they discourage that. But I finally got to the point where I started updating my resume.
Yeah.
And I started looking at my resume and being like, what does this even mean? Like any of it.
Yeah.
You know, what did I do? And like questioning the last, you know, 2 decades of work. And I'm just wondering, like, do you have any advice about these transitions that are really uncomfortable? It's uncomfortable to look at your resume and be like, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do? What do I want to do?
Yeah.
Not having the answers to those questions, thinking that I was going to find it through this work.
Absolutely.
You know, so do you have any advice
Yeah.
about like how to bring that up for myself?
I think there's a lot of work that goes into identifying for ourselves what are our superpowers. And again, it's feedback from others, thinking of your skills, thinking what you want to do, and telling that story. And the resume is one thing, right? Absolutely, you want to overhaul the resume to make sure it tells that story. But the way you communicate to your future employers when you're interviewing and you're interviewing them and they're interviewing you, having that story down. And listen, like, I would hire somebody any day that has the skills or the drive over they've already done it and they're mediocre, or, you know, I think they're going to be, basically, I care about what are you best at? And so maybe it's that you did this thing on the surface, but with the transition, there's these skills that are transferable, but you have to figure out kind of how to tell that story. And I think that's based on you doing that work to identify where are you best, what are these skills? And then when you look for roles, you have to be able to map your superpowers and your skills to that role and tell them that story. And listen, like doing transitions and you know, saying no and pushback, like this stuff's always hard. I think it gets a little bit easier as you do it more, but like it's, you know, and some people never get comfortable with things like speaking or, you know, asking for a raise. Like after I do it a few times, like I'm comfortable, but it's not comfortable for most people.
Right.
So it really depends on like what you're up for playing for. I mean, I think one of the things you can ask yourself if you're nervous about something is like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Right. And really think about it. And it's not that bad.
Yeah, but it's like I'm dealing with myself.
So that's work. That's work. No, that's work. And that's the thing. It's like, but you can learn more about yourself even through interview processes and asking them questions. And, you know, you're not going to know everything day one, and that's okay. And you can dig in and like have other people look at, you know, your resume. You can have, you know, people that you've worked with or people that you trust in your family, whatever, but you can also learn through that process so that when a conversation doesn't go as well as it should have, or you wanted, what happened? And learn through the journey of interviewing, you're going to get better at the story, right? I hope that helps.
It's just a weird spot.
It is, it's a tough one.
A few of us are feeling it.
It's tough. But again, it's like when you figure out, when you want to dig into where are you best, where are you great, like I would make it a project, right? Like really, what do you want to do? Like, I can't tell you that,
Yeah.
right? What skills are you really good at? And what were you using? What skills were you using in these roles? Again, it has nothing maybe to do with theater, right?
Yeah.
It could be that you loved the community development process of when you schedule one of those events.
Right.
Awesome. You know, like you can tell that story. It doesn't have to be about that industry.
Yeah.
So all of what you said has resonated.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned before, I've transitioned into a new role. I left the federal government. She said she's never heard that before, and went into the private sector. And I was almost 15 years in. And so just working for the government has been difficult, but so I moved over to being a consultant for the federal government, which is in turn turned into a massive, just like all this work to do, more work than before, you know,
Yeah.
literally putting me on a high level project and going, take off and do what you do best. And I'm going, I don't even know the content. I'm not an expert. So
Yeah.
imposter syndrome is like really, really high at this point, as well as, you know, just almost killing myself,
Yeah.
trying to achieve. And, you know, I have problems with perfectionism and just making sure everything's perfect.
Yep.
I hate speaking in public, and I think part of that is that, you know, need to perfect and just making sure I include everything in my presentations. And so one of the things that I realized through this transition is the need, you know, really looking at what my fears are and where they came from and where I'm afraid of loss and rejection.
Yeah.
I lost my father from suicide a few years ago.
Okay.
And witnessed it. So it
Wow.
was trauma, big,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
And so it really shed light into what, even the things that I was fearing before and what drove me to these certain positions. It was like, keep me out of position that I don't have to talk to Congress all the time. Because
Yeah.
I was doing that in DC and I was frightened by it. I mean, I literally would just like, I hated it. I would call in on, you know, I don't need to do this.
Yeah.
Because I was so afraid of it. And so I think, you know, one thing that I'm curious about, and I think you've already talked about it, and this is something I'm passionate about, and I'm finding with the new position, I'm going, this isn't really what I want to do.
Yeah.
I just fucked up. You know?
No, you
I just
didn't.
Literally, I was like beside myself. I mean, I was crying last night, I was
Oh.
crying this morning, going, I mean, just admittedly, and going. I don't know
You just made like the hardest step, which is you actually are saying it's not right, right? And that's the
Yeah.
hardest thing. Once you get to that realization, listen, like people have said to me, oh, why would you leave that role? Like you just started, it's gonna look bad in a resume. To hell with the resume. Like
Yeah.
if I'm not happy, if I don't like what I'm doing, if they sold me on some story and it wasn't actually the case, I can sell the story of like why I left that role, but like don't stay in it if it's not good for you.
Right.
You know, I think that's a really important one. And the perfectionism thing, listen, we have a lot of women identifying in this room. We live in a patriarchy and there's so much to, you know, unravel there around being perfectionist, working so hard, trying to get that, raise. And it's like, listen, like we could talk about it all day long, but ultimately it's for each of us. And it's almost like reestablishing an understanding throughout our career, because I know women of all ages, they're still going through it. But it's okay to not be perfect. Guess what I'm realizing as an executive? I need to delegate more. I need to step back. It's okay if I don't do 100% because I have so much to do. And that's great. But it's like, I wouldn't be able to do it if I was a perfectionist right now.
Yeah, and that's what, sitting with it and understanding how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
I just literally learned that this year.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can have feelings, I can talk about them.
Yeah.
Oh, I can have needs and wants and speak up, and that's hard, and it's hard to actually feel like you deserve it.
Oh yeah.
Because I've worked in emergency management, I mean, male dominated, completely, I mean,
Yeah.
oh, little girl, like in all male, rooms. And I've realized I'm detoxing from that because
Right.
now I'm more in a woman dominated culture, but still everybody's overworking to the point.
Yeah.
I gotta work tonight. I'm like, fuck that. I got a life, and everybody's, that's what
Yeah.
they're doing. And I'm going, this isn't what I came here for. So I think the personal work, and because I've done some shadow work, same thing.
Yeah.
Meditation is
Yeah.
morning, afternoon, yoga, working out. I mean, those are the things, and we're eating well. I mean, those are critical for just feeling better, to be able to present yourself. But I think even further, trauma informed like anything, and understanding that, I think is something I'm really, really wanting to work towards.
Yeah.
And seeing what you're doing and hearing your story, it really is inspiring. So
Yeah.
thank you.
No, thank you for sharing. And it's tough to talk about, right? It's like, it's super emotional. And I think when you can harness it and say, what did I learn from this? And what can I do to honor, these situations, myself, my family members? I mean, it's just, you're unstoppable, right? In the language you use, which is, sitting with something and having feelings. I mean, the more we kind of pause and the more intentional we can be with our decisions, the better place we're going to end up, right? If I sat with my feelings and I spent more time being intentional, I actually would not have taken the CRO role. And that's okay. I did it. I moved away from it. But if we can be smarter about or more intentional with when we are committing to and throwing ourselves into something, we're going to be able to escalate, to that next role faster. But I also want to make the point that as much as I'm doing professionally today, like I have met so many successful people that are not happy or fulfilled. And so that's why, when she's independent and the way I talk about things, the way I think about things, I am not just positioning to like maximize wealth, because that is not happiness. It's finding things that are fulfilling. When you do things that you're really good at, you will find money, right? It'll find you. But what is money? It's a construct. I mean, and I want us to be financially dependent. I want us to not have to depend on other people, right? But like at the same time, like I'm not here saying, hey, like make a bunch of money and you're going to find what you need in life. Like I will not say that. Whereas a lot of people will. But I will say to you, if you want to talk about negotiating your pay raise, I can help with that. But we're going to dig into things like professional confidence. What is your pathing? So that when you go there and you want to have that conversation, you know how to articulate and say, this is what I do. This is my value. These are the projects I've brought. And this is what I need. And you're going to be able to say it and use negotiation tactics so that you can get it. But again, I don't want to just talk about money because I think there's so much more than that.
Either we have to, like I wake up every day and I'm like, okay, today's gonna be a good day. Today's gonna happen today. And every day I leave and I'm like, fuck, like, it's not good. And if I reflect on this moment of time, I actually did learn a lot about who I am in this professional world. Because I thought I wanted one thing. Being an entrepreneur was so not good for me because then I wanted to hire someone. I said, I want to be an assistant. Now I'm an assistant, and I'm like, no, I'm a leader, so, but it's really just from day one in this job, it's kind of like, I know.
But you've learned more about yourself and you've learned more professionally, meaning the skills you've picked up through the transition, even if you don't think you've learned much, like I'm just telling you, you've learned something.
Yeah.
Every transition.
And I think I learned a lot about the parallels niche to
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah, it's exciting.
But not an easy feeling to carry.
I would say if it's helpful, sometimes you can find success in figuring out what you don't want just as much as what you do want, which I think could apply to jobs, it could apply to dating, could apply in a lot of places. So that's just what you want to do.
Just the positive light of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think back to this one, like the worst manager I ever had. There were a couple nuggets of things that he taught me that I still remember to this day. And like, while in the moment, sometimes I just pretended like I was in an investigative reporter role, like working undercover, and like that was my coping mechanism. But I was able to take away some things from him, and also an example of this is what I will not do when I am in this position, and I wouldn't feel that strongly, and I wouldn't advocate for who worked for me the way that I have had I not had that. So, well, it sucks in the moment, I'm not gonna deny that, just having that perspective of it's not gonna stay, it's not gonna be this way forever, right? 1 month, 6 months, 6 months, a year from now, it'll be wildly different. It doesn't sound like you're gonna stay stuck forever to me, but
I agree. The way you said every day I'm waking up with this thing or this thought, like you're right there. Just gotta push you a little bit,
yes.
but you're right there.
I would recommend therapy, that helps too.
Yes, that too.
I have a question really quick.
Yeah.
Natalie. Just as far as like, whenever you're standing your ground about a point and there's maybe someone of equal power, like above you, kind of poking holes in that story, kind of making you feel like less validated in your truth. And like, oh,
Yeah.
about that. Leaving afterwards with like, oh, she messed up. Like, what would be your advice as far as that, like professionally kind of standing your ground?
Yeah.
Especially when that's something like is a little bit more pushy. Like,
Sure.
Just to put my spin on it, I tend to be a little bit more laid back and like go with the flow. Like, what do we need? And I'll just form around that. But it really is getting to the point where it's harder and harder because I feel like I'm just giving so much.
Yeah.
And not receiving as much back, or I just feel exhausted from it.
First of all,
I get angry.
great question. Great question. And I will say that we all are different personalities. We're all different people. And the more you know about yourself, the more you're going to know about what you need and, the dynamic or the way that you're going to have confidence when you ask for something or when you have that path or that intention of this is what I want and this is how I'm going to execute to get it. And there's work that I do with people where it's like, okay, you want to ask for more money, like make sure you have a game plan and you can really clearly articulate what is your value and why are you asking for this? Have numbers, right? Like really be able to hit the nail. I think for you already have the awareness that this is happening. And so it sounds like a few things. One is try different things, right? I don't want you to become type A and stress yourself out by like standing up and being like too strong, but say no and have boundaries and, ask like, if you know that you're asking quietly or softly or not being direct, maybe a certain person needs it more direct because they can't reach you or they don't understand how to communicate with you. And so if you don't ask for it and it needs to be asked a different way, I feel like there's some art or beauty in, even if you're softer, like you can still ask for what you want. Maybe you're not going to ask for it with like, the tone of my voice or like the way that I say it, but you're going to come up with a way that works for you. But it's so important to recognize like it's not working today, so work on it. Because if you just get like trampled on and you just get, walked all over, like that's unhealthy, that's not fun. And the fact that you're even asking, like clearly you want to make a change. So
Totally, yeah, and like work on setting boundaries and stuff a little bit more. It's just difficult, right?
Oh, yeah.
You are so willing to push it, and you're like,
but I think when you get to the point where you're like, I'm confident, I know what I'm doing is right. So even if they want to be like micromanaging or nitpicky or whatever it is, and are they your direct manager or are they just someone you work with, right? So it's like, what is the situation?
right.
In some cases, you have to move on, right? People don't leave companies, they leave managers, bad managers, I should say. So she's never leaving. No, I'm kidding. But it's just one of those things. It's like, can you create those boundaries? Is it somebody you have to report into? So I don't know, I'd probably pick it apart a little more.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any questions over here, but everyone's still on. I don't know how high. But it was so nice. I'm so glad, people came, and I hope this was, productive. You can keep asking questions if you want. Loved the feedback and thoughts so far. And if you're around Friday, there's these 2 virtual events, both free via Denver Startup Week. One's on mindset. It's a panel discussion with a neuroscientist, a few mindfulness coaches, nutritional psychologist, pretty cool group. And then speaking of asking for things and negotiating, it's going to be a presentation I lead separately on the art of deal closing that'll include negotiation tips and strategies. So yeah, if you go to she'sindependent.com, there's at the top of the website, there'll be like a click through so that you can sign up for things if you want. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for coming out. Yeah.
How long is your resume?
It's a great question. I have a lot on there, but I haven't updated it with my newest roles and advisory seats. So I somehow used to have it on one page, but now it's going to go over. But my board resume, because I'm going to be sitting on boards, given some of the work I'm doing, is going to be 2 to 3 pages. But my professional resume will be like, I try to keep it at 1. It's probably going to be 1.5 pages now. 2 pages.
That is a good question. Like, how many years did you go back? Because I heard like range of things, like only for the past 2 years.
Listen, I'm a fan of, and I could show you like, this is my resume or this is an example, but like, I honestly think showing more roles where like there's anything that's interesting. Like I did roles starting at the age of, 14, 15. I'd work at my dad's, company, or I'd do internships that were, paid or unpaid. I started dropping those off at some point because I had so much professional experience, but I kept them on for a long time. The other thing is you can have versions of resumes, right? I think private sector is different than government. But I'm a fan of, don't be too wordy, but like anything that looks like it's potentially interesting professionally. And then the other thing is it's ultimately the person. Like you're hiring somebody, you're hiring a person, a company's hiring you, it's a hiring manager or a boss. And like people care about stories. And so do not forget the authentic you, who you are, what you bring. It's not just the work stuff, right? I like to ski, I like to cook, I like dark chocolate. I mean, whatever it is, like, what connects? I'm religious, whatever it is, you never know where they're going to say, oh, great. We actually are very religious here and we value that. Like, I don't know, I'm making this up, but my point is like, who are you? Because if you're not showing up as you, it takes a lot of energy. And you're just not going to excel ultimately, and you're not going to, really enjoy it. So, yes.
I'm trying to work on not saying I'm sorry all the time.
Yes.
So I don't know if anybody else is. Just as far as like, I guess just the transitions and, trying to hone in on, so for example, like maybe having a college degree or certifications or licenses, and what particularly, for example, what you're focusing on, did you have to take more certifications or classes? Because, I have oodles of degrees, but it's like now I'm going, oh, I don't know if this is what I want my degree in.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I mean, I really think it's ultimately the person. It's the way they think. It's their energy. Like, it matters what you studied to some degree, but then it doesn't. You learn so much in roles. And so I never got an MBA. I never got a grad degree. My dad had a PhD at 24. Okay. I'm the only person in my immediate family, like without an advanced degree. And for me, I recognized that I was smart, that I could learn, read voraciously, like I could do all this stuff. And then I didn't need the additional degrees. I just went through this, comprehensive boardroom training because I said, for that, I want to go through that training. But in general, I do a lot of self-study. What degrees, what do you want to highlight? It's great because it shows you invested your time, you were successful going through school. But I've seen successful people where, it's undergrad, some college I've never heard of, and they're still like super bright, doing amazing things. So, but again, degrees say something. You committed, you invested. I'll tell you something. I tried I wasn't excited when I was on Wall Street, but I was going for the CFA exam and I just couldn't fucking muster it up to study. So I failed it twice. And I just didn't take it again because I just wasn't excited about it. So if I was going to do it again, would I have gotten the business degree because my company would have paid? Probably. But it's okay that I did it.
Yeah,
And I had to get through that. I had to get through that, that confidence piece. Yeah. But some roles do require degrees.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course.
What's your number one tool for building professional confidence? Like, what's the number one thing that you would start with as far as like you want to build that?
I really think it's the self-work. So I think a few of us talked about it. It's like digging into yourself and saying, what am I best at? What do I want to do? And it's finding that intersection. Because ultimately when you uncover that and you say, wow, and you start thinking of these times that you did something great in roles, whether it was professional or personal and it applies to the professional realm. I mean, once you recognize that, you're going to have new confidence when you talk about it, when you think about it, when you look for roles. So I really think it's this kind of self-work around understanding you. But once you have a passion, I mean, you're kind of unstoppable there as well. Yeah. Awesome. So thanks for joining on the Zoom and in person. This was great. Thanks for having me.